Thank you for joining our webinar today, part 2 of our webinar series, How to Accelerate Agile. Today we're going to focus on culture and mindset. My name is Kelly Hamilton, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator today. Before we get started, I want to go over just a few key items. We want to make today's webinar as interactive as possible. So first, we welcome your questions throughout the webinar the entire time. There's a Q&A section on the screen. Please feel free to submit your questions directly into that window, hit submit, and at the end of the webinar today, we'll go through everybody's questions as many as we possibly can do. Also, on the right side of the screen, we've included some additional resources for you. A lot of those will be referenced throughout the webinar today, so feel free to click around with those as well. And if you want to enlarge the presentation area, all you have to do is just hit the expand button on the slide module, and you can expand it both on your mobile phone or desktop. And finally, we are recording today's webinar. We're going to post it on the Agile website later today, and once it's live, we'll send you a copy. That way you can watch it again, or if you want to forward it to any of your colleagues, please feel free to do so. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to today's two speakers. First, we have Bhavani Krishnan. She's an Agile expert who has over a decade experience with Agile transformations at Fortune 500 and federal organizations. She believes change begins with the heart of the individual and ripples through the collective mindset of the organization. Bhavani surfaces and resolves the fear that underlies change by seeking all perspectives and striving for renewed connection between people in a way that naturally supports adaptive thinking. She's achieved the Certified Agile Leadership credentials through Scrum Alliance. We also have Mason Chaudhry. He's the COO for Excion and an avid Agile evangelist. Mason's led the development of Excion's Agile Adoption Maturity Model, which is designed to help organizations tackle the complexities of adopting, scaling, and improving Agile practices across the enterprise. Mason has over a decade of expertise helping organizations leverage best practices in development, management, and delivery of projects and products. He's also Safe Agile, Lean Six Sigma, and CMMI certified. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Mason.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm very excited about today's topic. It's a very germane topic to digital transformation and what organizations are trying to do today. As a matter of fact, it's so salient that this morning I'm walking into the Excion kitchen here in our office, and CNBC was playing in the background. They had an executive from Coca-Cola telling the folks at Squawk Box that, look, we are about to launch a new seltzer called AHA. And this new seltzer is going to be the absolute best. And the folks from Squawk Box were like, well, Pepsi already has the market share of seltzer. What are you doing differently? He's like, no, this is going to be the best. They're like, well, it takes you forever to roll out products. How are you going to be quicker at Coca-Cola? And he says, we've really focused on innovation, and we're going to be able to get this product right out the door. They pushed him even further. What's different at Coca-Cola today that makes it seem like you're going to be able to launch this and capture market share? And he said, you know what? Coca-Cola, quote, is focused on business agility. We've had a cultural mind shift at Coca-Cola that now allows us to kick out product a lot faster. That last part I paraphrased, but at the end of the day, I'm walking into the kitchen this morning before we're conducting a webinar, and I'm hearing that Coca-Cola is focused on culture, agile culture, to get some good seltzer out. That was an aha moment, and that's what they're naming their seltzer, so we'll see. So with that said, 82% of organizations want to go agile across their enterprise, yet only 16% are successful. The last time we met in this forum, we talked about some of the nuts and bolts requirements of being successful. You got to have good ceremonies. You got to follow through with your good ceremonies. You got to have the right roles. Today we're going to focus on a topic that affects every size organization. You're a nonprofit association. You're a large health payer. You're Coca-Cola. No matter who you are, if you want to move past time box development agile and truly gain business agility across your enterprise, you've got to have a cultural mindset. Culture, agile culture, is a big problem. How do you solve that, Bhavani?
Well, Mason, you said a lot there and, asked a very loaded question. But, as you said, it all starts with the mindset, It's actually the collection of beliefs and thoughts that build the mental attitude in a person. And the longer one tends to build in their beliefs, the stronger their mindset becomes. And an organization that is on the path to transformation should capitalize on this. Cultivate a collaborative culture. And that is the first step towards, bridging the gap that you see in an organization today. And throughout my career as a coach, I've come across major patterns of barriers to this over and over again, whether it is the mindset or the culture or the combination of that. And when you approach me to share my experiences in today's webinar, I immediately thought a few things that stood out as common problems. And I want to talk about, some of them today, but, one of them is too many projects at the same time, and I'm sure the audience can relate to that. This is a common problem. Every organization I've coached at has gone through this phase. Too many projects in flight at the same time, focus on just the resource utilization, specialized skill and optimization by activity, and heavy and prescriptive processes, you name it.
Pretty much over-promising, under-delivering. Give us an example, please.
All of these lead to the never-ending loop of cultural challenges, right? To break out of this, you need commitment and strong leadership. 2 years ago, I was coaching at a major bank, and going in, I had learned the big problem they were facing was too many initiatives in progress, meaning like too many projects, in progress at the same time. It's not that they hadn't, tried to work it out. They try to prioritize, but we're facing with multiple high priority items. They had many stakeholders that came to them, and every one of them felt that their project was important. And it's common, right? It's a common problem that you face today where you have multiple lines of businesses and everybody feels, mine is a priority and I promise, greater return on investment, or my product can bring more business value, whatever it might be. So as a first step, we recommended a simple assessment.
And what were the outcomes? Because I know in my own experience, a lot of time there's a lot of pressure created when there's a lot of stuff committed. So what were the outcomes of your assessment?
So we wanted to do the assessment to find a few things, and the outcomes were very clear. We found the gaps in the team makeup. We found that there was a lot of impact with cost of delay. There was big disconnect with the roadmap. Their above and below lines were not meeting, right? Whatever they had committed to above the line, meaning, in this quarter we needed to get these delivered, they were not meeting those. And also, we found that there were a lot of opportunities that we could negotiate. And one thing was very clear. We learned the undeniable fact that there was a huge disconnect between the many stakeholders. And we wasted no time in getting the stakeholders, the product owners, and the subject matter experts to meet together. We called it a big room meeting, but prior to that, the pre-meeting assignment was for the POs to determine three things. What was the priority, what was the severity, and what would be the cost of delay? And the big direction to them, was that there cannot be two items with the same priority, meaning that there cannot be two priority one items. There could be multiple severity, similar severity, but only one that would be priority. That would be one high priority.
But why? Why can't there be something with same priority?
So Mason, think about a time, when you went to an ER, right? The doctors in the ER, they ask you to identify the scale of your discomfort, right? So that is your severity. Based on the severity, then the doctor assigns a priority. So the severity is the pain someone is feeling, but then the priority is based on the severity, right? So there could be multiple patients with, whatever the severity might be, but based on that, the doctor will only prioritize, one patient versus the other. So similarly, you need to identify which items are, like similar severity maybe, but then like identify the priorities and assign that to your backlog. And the next step after the product owner prioritized the backlog was to organize the projects into value streams. Now, value stream mapping helps you identify the flow, the dependencies, and tries to eliminate waste. Through this, they realized there were some functionalities that were enablers and that needed to be prioritized higher. And once we established the flow, the next step was to prioritize between the different features that they came up with. And we used what SAFe calls the weighted shortest job first to remove the emotions and strictly base the decision on data. It took us, multiple days to establish a solid feature backlog that helped the organization visualize their priorities. And in the process, they were able to determine waste and eliminate some of the projects that added no immediate value. And that was, the big gain in that, or from that exercise, where they realized there were certain projects that they needed to stop so that they could start finishing, the ones that were important. And also their structure changed from project to product. They were able to align their multiple value streams, or their different products to value streams. And teams were established for a value stream, not a project. So when you establish a team for a value stream, you are able to continue with that team till the product cease to exist, right? They were able to create cross-functional skill set to sustain and also self-contained special skills.
Gotcha. And so I just want to reiterate something I heard from you. I'm totally with you. Value stream mapping, value stream sometimes bridges the divide. And if folks on our audience are already doing that, that's fantastic. But if not, bringing people from business and IT together through value stream mapping has a lot of value. But with that said, Bhavani, I got a question for you. How does mindset and culture fit into all that?
So if you think about it, all of the above requires a mindset change and commitment to change the culture, right? It's not easy. Customer-centric is part of that mindset and culture. It's like, telling a person, it's actually going from telling a person to getting them to buy into a collaborative and cultivating environment. So it's very similar to, understanding that you need a shared responsibility. Responding to a customer need is an organizational duty, right? As you see on the screen, the blue bullets popping up, if somebody is saying that I know everything and there's nothing for me to learn anymore, that's not the culture and the mindset that will help you to succeed. You need an organization that is of a growth mindset, that is open to learning, where you see leaders are, modeling that type of behavior. If somebody is, ready to give up, you need someone to tell them that, hey, come on, let's give it another try, right? I'll help you. I'll pull you up. And, instead of project teams, you have product teams, and where failure is okay. It is safe to experiment and, learn from that moment. It's not an environment where failure is not acceptable at all. So, statistics show that, a siloed organization is slow to respond to market needs, and culture is, a big influencer on that. Instead of promoting vertical structure, you need to, think about how do I expand this type of, behavior within the organization. And, when mindset shift happens, you see an individual go from, the other side to the growth mindset, where they believe that there is a lot more they can learn from. And, an organization it goes from, the mediocre to a very successful, entity at that point.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to look at it from a different way. I mean, I'm in agreement with you. If someone in a small organization or large organization just feels like a cog in the machine, they only know their job, that's all they do, that's not growth mindset. You want folks to be able to feel like there's a lot more they can learn, and if they see the vision, they understand the product, they're going to do that. And so it does come down to roles and people seeing beyond what their job description might say. So what is the impact of roles and responsibilities, Bhavani, in this equation?
So that's the other thing that I want to talk to you about today is, one of the other cultural barriers is staffing in an organization. We see day in, day out the politics caused by an organization's hierarchy. And one of the main concerns I hear from, different organizations I've been through, their project managers, especially in an agile transformation, is that they won't have a role in the company. And, this is caused by the fear and the uncertainty. And, as you said, the leaders are, the big influence in this, and they should eliminate all of those, or any kind of fear and uncertainty at the onset of the transformation.
Well, I'm a former PM from the world of waterfall, so I feel that fear back in the day. I felt it. But walk us through an experience you've had in this.
So a few years ago, I had the opportunity to work for a federal client. I was part of this transformation from the inception. I even helped write the proposal. I say, that the reason I mention that is, that there is great importance of starting a transformation right from the get-go. The proposal, among many other things mentioned, the client will work with us to establish an Agile PMO, staff for success, and define the roles and responsibilities, during the discovery phase. And, we were very focused on making sure to repurpose skill set and identifying training requirements to help them succeed in the new roles. It was very important to make sure that everybody felt included, and, we kind of wanted to eliminate what we talked about earlier, that fear, that uncertainty for, anybody in the organization.
Yeah, and Bhavani, I know that there are folks in our audience today that are looking to transliterate previous roles and skill sets in the Agile world. Let's use my old example of project management. How do project managers translate in an Agile world?
So, Mason, a lot of times I've heard, there's commonly said that project managers can naturally fit into a Scrum Master role. And it's a big mistake, and it's a common mistake to assume that a traditional manager or a project manager will naturally fit into a Scrum Master role. It's nothing alike, right? Scrum Master is not focusing on just the status update versus, the common understanding from a project manager is that one of their job responsibilities is to ask for status, right? So just because of that, it doesn't mean that they naturally fit into that role. So, we made sure to interview the individuals to determine what their goals were and where they saw themselves fit. When we involved the impacted individuals in the decision process, we saw a higher level of participation, higher level of motivation and commitment towards the success of the transformation. And, just like you, I was a project manager back in the days as well, so I could relate to that very well. And, I remember one of the project managers that I worked with, she saw herself fit into product management. And, we learned that she had prior experience as a business analyst and wanted to progress in that area, so it was a natural fit for her. So similarly, another example I remember was, a developer wanting to pursue functional role and wanted to get certified as a Scrum Master. And, we respected that, and we felt that if we give him enough, resources and get him through a formal training, he could do really well because this was coming from his heart and this was, his goal. So we paired him with a Scrum Master so he could shadow. And I recently caught up with him, just to learn how he was doing, and he's a Scrum Master for 3 teams at another company, and he's going strong. So that kind of gives you, the satisfaction at the end of the day that wonderful, it's you respect their, goals, and you pair them up to do what they're asking for, and you see success from that. The other thing I wanted to mention is throughout that process, when we're talking about staffing for success, we established communities of practices. We held Scrum Master dojos where the coaches could mentor members from multiple disciplines like development, testing, etc. And this dojo actually ran for 8 weeks. I'm not saying that it has to be for 8 weeks. It could be long or shorter. But in my experience, we ran it for 8 weeks. And at the end of the 8 weeks, the students took an assessment and were prepped for formal certifications. So this was a great success and worked well for the client to create talent organically and become independent. Now, you can imagine the long list of benefits, there, but it's important to mention throughout the process, the client trusted our assessment, the judgment, and the recommendations that we made. And that comes from a culture that is backed by a growth mindset and someone who believes in higher purpose, an organization that wants to be competitive yet innovative in its approach to success.
I really like your example about the Scrum Master, but I'm going to throw something at you. I worked at a large health payer a few years ago, and we had an Agile transformation, quote unquote, and the Agile transformation was really rolled out on the dev teams, on the QA teams, on the engineering teams, but it really didn't permeate through the business teams. And after a while, everyone was like, yeah, Agile's better, we're moving quicker, but the business still came to them like it was a ticket order process. The leadership there was lacking. How does this type of disconnect between the two sides, where there shouldn't be two sides, but between these two sides, impact cultural change?
It impacts heavily, Mason. But one thing I want to mention before I, get to the answer is you need a leadership there that can model this type of behavior. As you said, there shouldn't be two sides, right? It's an organization. So, the IT versus business is not a competition between, the two divisions in an organization. When you see something like that, everything is broken. That's what creates the organizational silos, and, you go through the multiple, effects of what that can cost the organization, and that's, just irrevocable. But back to your question in terms of, how does that impact the cultural change? It becomes really hard for them to adapt to, anything positive that you're trying to do at that point, right? Again, I would say that a leadership, that is strong in terms of bridging the gap between the two is very important. We actually have a whole webinar that we did a few months ago that talked about the leadership styles for a successful Agile transformation, and I think we can actually put it in the resource section, or it is already there that we can. In addition, I will say that you need a combination of dissonant and resonant styles of leadership. For example, coercive leadership, as harsh as it may sound, works best in a crisis where you are trying to, bring the two divisions together. Similarly, pace setting also works well when you're trying to establish new teams or change low-performing teams and motivate them to higher standards. In your example where you mentioned, there's a gap between the IT and the business teams, coercive and the pace setting works really well, where you have this total opposite sides working against even sometimes, where they can bring them together and bridge that gap. The organization type also matters, right? You cannot deny that top-down management style is slowly disappearing. It's just not prevalent today.
Yeah, but help me understand that, because I know organizations in an agile world and a digital transformative world are moving away from command and control and top down, but what type of organizations are doing this?
There are many types, Mason. When we talk about, the perfect example of what type of an organization works in the situation, I think in the resource section we have somewhere available some clippings about Morningstar, the tomato company, and then also Patagonia. Because these type of organizations have understood that bureaucracy is becoming obsolete, right? These high-performing organizations are creating pockets of positive culture. And you will be surprised to find out that it's not a gradual progression from one to the other pocket. High-performing teams are rather radical in their approach, and there are generally no gray areas. And we know, a lot of us know the 4 historical types of organizations that you see up there, from impulsive to participative, but Frederick Laloux actually talks about a new and emerging type, the teal organization, the evolutionary type, right? He talks about a type where there are no bosses. Everyone has a fluid peer relationship. He says peer pressure regulates the system better than hierarchy. And that is, such an example, or Morningstar is such an example of, one organization where they're self-managing, they are, working towards higher purpose, they have shared value, they have growth mindset. But at the same time, I'm not advocating that an organization eradicate, the roles of a superior and a subordinate, the relationship between them. I'm only saying, find your balance, somewhere between the impulsive and the evolutionary. Gotcha.
So I'm going to pause you for a second. This is, I think, a great slide. And in that slide, I'd like to ask our audience something. No matter if it's your team, your portfolio, your entire enterprise, take a look. Are you guys impulsive, conformist? Have you guys gotten to the evolutionary part? We would love to take a poll of folks who are actually listening today and see where you fall. I look at this for organizations that we work with, that Scion works with, and a lot of them are moving from conformist to innovative with a goal to be really empowered, have really empowered teams and things like that. And a lot of times what you'll find is a lot of teams see themselves bought in, yeah, we're definitely agile, then they really are. And this drives from pockets of positivity, pockets of practice, yet there's pockets of passive resistance that lead to inertia. Wouldn't you say, Bhavani?
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, you guys take a look at that poll and do that, and we'll look at those results in a little bit. But let's keep moving. Lots of individuals, Bhavani, and teams see themselves, like I mentioned earlier in our webinar, as a cog in a machine rather than part of a living, breathing enterprise. Like the Coca-Cola guy earlier today said, we are all working together to be innovative. They want to be mission-focused. If you're only accountable for your little slice of scope, it's tough to adopt a growth mindset. What's actually going on here? How can you change that, Bhavani? How can you make people buy in more and see that accountability?
So, accountability comes from positive culture, right? And culture is the way of life that includes beliefs, patterns, and behaviors. And it is deeply influenced by the circumstances, the environment, and the people we're surrounded by. We hear people say that Agile is not a methodology and it's a culture, right? And to me, that has tremendous depth. It can be an organization's culture, and it can heavily improve an organization's culture. And, a culture that embraces the learning and, the growth mindset, a culture that, has positive impact towards business-driven behaviors. And when the leaders of the organization believe in the culture and mindset shift, you see a movement and you see positive impact. And that movement becomes contagious. Mm-hmm. And while changing hearts and minds is not that easy, you can still start small and create pockets within the enterprise to experiment. And leaders should be invested in this.
Gotcha. All right, that sounds good, but let's run through an example. I think like our audience, we're example focused. You've had a lot of experience in it. Mind filling us in?
Sure. I always, share this example or this experience with a lot of people, and I had the opportunity to work with one such leader. I worked for a financial company, and their enterprise data division was going through an Agile transformation just a few years ago. And just like any other organization during expansion, they were running out of space. And while the main office was going through a more Agile-friendly open space type of transformation, they had rented off-site offices areas to accommodate growing teams, which was less than ideal. And when I say less than ideal, it still had, long cubicles, covered cubicles, high partitions, and, lack of collaborative space. They didn't even have, many conference rooms where the teams could meet for, refinement sessions or some of the other important ceremonies an Agile team should have. Some of the managers, again, for this team were ready to compromise on this because they had to operationalize these teams. And I understand and I can relate with them. But, the cost of it would be that the teams will not be able to understand what the requirements were. There would be no shared understanding and, lack of collaboration, which is the heart of Agile and which is what we all believe in, right? So the VP understood as much it was important to mobilize the teams, it was equally important to create the right environment that will enable their transformation to be successful. And he understood that in the long run, the organization would end up spending more money and cause delays when the foundations are not right. So, that lack of space would mean less collaboration, and less collaboration leads to lack of shared understanding. And when the team is not on the same page, we all have seen costly mistakes happen. So while it may seem like a small compromise, the impacts would be huge. And, this leader, he understood. So he was like, this is our success criteria, and I am going to commit to it. I'm not going to compromise on, whether even if it delays the delivery of our business value, that's fine. We'll take care of that somehow. But I want to be able to empower the team. And, he held everybody accountable. And you need such a leader that holds not just the team accountable, but also themselves to the success of the transformation. Someone that will lead the culture and mindset shift and model the same with his or her actions. And, that's why I truly believe that in a transformation, especially with culture and mindset, leaders, hold the key to success. I also want to mention that, it's not just, executives that are leaders. Leaders are in every possible, leaders come in every possible way, and they can be in a team, they can be, within the program, even a project manager could be that, right? We actually, I remember we did a webinar on how to lead enterprise Agile, and we talk a lot about the different leadership styles, and we actually have wealth of information in there that we provided. So I would encourage you to take a look at that as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. And just what I'm getting from you is leadership at all levels, be inclusive, show people that this is not just talk, that you're going to take the actual requisite steps. So I would say to folks on the phone, executives, managers, team leads, practitioners, leadership at all levels is what I'm getting, and it just cannot be talk. Because if you really want to move that needle, you've got to empower folks. So with that said, Bhavani, what is next?
Oh, this is one of my favorite, Mason, and I actually super excited that we, I think, are thinking about doing our next webinar on this topic, organizational silos. It is one of the biggest barriers to cultural shift in an organization, and I've seen this in every organization I've worked at. So that is, my favorite picture that we have on the screen there, it's the elephant syndrome, right? So when you look at that, you see that people who don't have, access to big picture, it's very similar to that on that picture there. It's, somebody who has their eyes tied is thinking that, the leg of the elephant is a tree and the tail is a rope. And, it's very similar to that when you don't see the big picture, when your organization is divided into different silos. You just don't understand what's going on. You just don't know, what is that the organization is working towards. You don't understand the vision. You don't understand the goal. It's, the unwillingness to share information within the same organization is just mind-boggling. And the attitude, or this type of attitude, is sadly becoming, growingly common in all types and all sizes of organization. While I have yet to come across a successful transformation where the silos are, non-existent, I can proudly recollect few experiences where I was able to challenge the status quo and bring some changes.
And that makes sense. And just, quick thought here. It doesn't really matter about the size of the organization. In my years of doing this, it's the lack of transparency and information flow that hinders progress. An example of that, it's not that a group is withholding information from another group. It's if you do not have transparency and clear communication, you might not know that we've got issues on the dev team, and I might not know that there's different needs by the customer. And so I'm totally with you that the communication and transparency element is critical, not just for Agile transformation, but if you really want a culture, an Agile culture where we can move quickly, we've got to be able to talk together quickly. So I mentioned that we have all sorts of folks on the line today. Some of our participants are from nonprofit space, some are from health payers, we've got some Fortune 500, some federal. Can you tell us about some of the experiences you've had with one of these groups?
Sure. I worked at a nonprofit organization a few years ago. It was actually a relatively small organization, but even for a small organization, they had big challenges. They had long-held competition and grudges between senior managers. And, they were territorial, trust was broken, they had no, it's not that they had no clue of the big picture. Now these, senior managers might have an understanding of what it was, but it was just not, clearly visible to the team members. So I want to, get your attention, the audience attention to the picture here, and I'll tie it back into what I have in my mind. So I want, everybody to take a look at this red thing on the screen and think about what it is, and just think about it and come up with, what it is. I'm not going to ask you, but I just want you to, think about what it could be. And I'll, tell you what it is in a minute. So back to, what I was saying, there was no clear visibility between the teams of what the big picture was. These managers had favorites, and no outsider could penetrate through that circle. The impact was visible to an outsider, like me, even from day one. And I remember observing a stand-up ceremony, for the team, and witnessed their manager directing the team members not to share progress with the integration testers for whatever reason they were not part of the team, right? So the team was barely functioning. They didn't know what the big picture was. They committed too many stories, and they did not know what their velocity was. And it had become, habit for them to kick the can down the road at the end of every sprint. And some of the senior leadership of that organization had long relationship with the organization. Many of them, actually started their careers there and were well above 20 to 25 years of tenure at that point. So it was really hard to, challenge their mindset where they felt they were, it was their way. And anytime you would talk to them about changing anything, they would say, oh, but that's not the way we do it here. We do it this way. And they would be like, well, this is the organization's Agile way, and this is what we have been doing. And they really couldn't see the chaos. They really couldn't see the gap or the disconnect. And the only ray of my hope was my sponsor, who hired me to help bring some semblance to the chaos, right? So long story short, I wanted to leverage that to the to advantage or advance the situation. And the first step was to involve HR in this transformation. Now, we made it a performance goal that everyone in the company, from enterprise to the team level, understand the big picture. We invested in tools like version 1 and to visualize the portfolio vision, and the product team could understand what that vision was for each theme and decompose those into initiatives. Now, if a story or a requirement was not, able to link to the organization's goal and the product vision, then it had no business being in the backlog. So the goal was to create common understanding and shared vision of the big picture. So I really, really hope that you all were thinking about that it was the red cup when we showed you the zoomed in, right? For those of you that was not able to identify what it was, I am with you. I actually, use this in one of my trainings to drive the point home. It's when you are too close, when you are, too much at the weeds, you just really don't understand and you don't realize what the big picture is. But when you take a step back and you see what the big picture is, you understand what it is, right? So if I had told you, looking at that zoomed in picture of the cup, hey, your requirement is to fill, whatever, maybe like juice, water, whatever it is that I tell you, you'd be like, I don't even understand what it is. How can I fill water or juice into that, right? But when you look at it from from this level, you know what it is. So it's really important to share the big picture, and really important to share that vision and be clear about it. So back to my story that I was sharing with you. This act was not easy to achieve, and attitudes were difficult to change, especially when there was zero interest from the majority of the team. It did take us, I remember, a year or so to slowly change and create unified vision and work towards a common goal. We conducted learning sessions and communities of practice to encourage employee engagement. And, we even went to the length of creating, mailboxes where employees could create anonymous feedback if they saw some anti-patterns. And people were, committed to this transformation, or I should say people who were committed, they progressed and excelled. But those who saw this as a challenge could, naturally not fit into this. They either left or were let go. And, slowly I remember that the toxic culture, was switched with trust and transparency to a certain extent. But, breaking this organizational silo was the hardest of all. And, I will summarize that you need a clear vision, commitment, and perseverance to succeed, in this situation.
Bhavani, I love your example, because here I am, the developer, thinking of ping pong balls going in the cup. So you know what? We all have different visions, and unless we're seeing the big picture together, sometimes we deviate. So thank you for sharing that on the big picture. This is an interesting topic we're talking about today. Sometimes you can be like, hey, for ceremonies, run your retrospective like this. Look at your grooming sessions. But for this topic, what our hope is, for those listening, that you take some of these recommendations and you start slipping them into your teams and saying, where are we weak? So Bhavani started by talking about the fact you got to establish that interest. Are we really going down a cultural mind shift? Do the assessment. understand where you are strong. Your team might have a good handle, your organization, on what the big picture is, but your folks might not be empowered to do anything about it, or vice versa. Set the tone with leadership, all up and down. That's what I'm hearing from Bhavani. It's not just about execs, it's not just about middle management, everyone from practitioners all the way up. Empower folks in a new culture. Get them from thinking they're a cog in the machine to actually becoming one in a value stream. I love value streams. Set clear expectations that don't overpromise. Bhavani started talking about, you've got to be able to finish well instead of always worrying about starting. Encourage a short feedback loop. This is something I've seen in my own career. Wait too long to see what's wrong or not working. We should be getting feedback very quickly. Open communication. This, I'm hoping most of the people on this line, it resonates with you, because no matter where you sit within your organization or what your role is, better communication will facilitate faster adoption, faster transformation. That decision making, you could be an association serving members, you could be a health payer serving members, or you could be the guy from Coca-Cola who heard on TV today. You've got to be able to empower people if you want the innovation to be expedited. And one thing I have learned is you've got to reward people for this, and you will not get, guess what? The Heisman. This is my slide on here. You get a lot of Heisman when you're trying to get people to buy into change, and especially if it's outside of dev teams. You want to overcome those barriers. You're not alone. One thing I do want to mention in all of this is not everyone's going to have every answer. If you didn't hear something or a question you had or a thought you might have had on something we shared, please feel free to reach out to us. Bhavani and I are available to touch base with you on any of the challenges that we described. And I mention this because it is November. We're planning for 2020. No matter what your organization's like, now is the time to speak up. Tell your teams, tell your leadership that these are some of the issues that we should consider addressing as we move into 2020. I started by talking about 82%. 82% of everyone wants to go Agile. 16% are getting there. Let's all work collectively to change those figures. So, I want to mention one more thing. We talked about organizational silos. This is a hot and heavy topic that touches practically every organization that we help through our Agile practice. Organizational silos occur naturally. There are definitely concrete steps that you can take to break those barriers. We would love to talk to you after Turkey Day and after the holidays on this topic. So please mark your calendars now, Tuesday the 28th. We will be touching on that topic. And so I would like to go to questions and the poll, so I'm going to hand it back to Kelly. But before I do, I want to thank Bhavani for sharing quite a bit. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Bhavani and Mason. That was great. We have quite a few questions that have come through, so we're going to get through all those. And if you are listening, there is still time. Go ahead and write a question and hit submit, and we'll make sure that you get all of your responses. So before we jump in, because there's quite a few of them, let's go to the poll results. And Bhavani, kind of give us some feedback of what you're seeing here.
So it's interesting to see that only 1.9%, and I'm also seeing that only 50% of the attendees actually, submitted their poll. So that could be why as well. But it's interesting to see just 1.9 fit into the evolutionary. But also, it gives me some hope to see that at least that many are already into the teal organization, right? But it's good to see that we have some people on the participative and the innovative as well, and the impulsive is not that high. As I suspected, a lot of people fit into the conformist. I was hoping that it was somewhere in between conformist and participative, so that's actually good. Again, fitting into impulsive is not as bad, right? Because depending on where their organization is, that might be, the right type of organization for them in that situation. As I said, power and command can come in handy when you are actually in the early stages of transformation. And the same with, conformance, right? If you are, going through that transformation, especially in the early stages, you are going to fit into the traditional styles. And but again, I'm super excited to see that at least 1.9% fit into that evolutionary, where your style is powered by growth mindset, where your company believes in shared value and sharing that higher purpose and big picture. So I'm really excited about that.
Great, and thank you for everybody who submitted an answer. So let's jump into the questions. So the first one I have, let me paraphrase this. I heard about the upcoming webinar, and this person is excited for it, but I have a burning question. How does culture impact organizational silos? And it continues, we have an organization with different cultures and different divisions. How can you impact it on a whole?
So the first step is to identify so you mentioned, so this person is talking about the different, culture within the different divisions of their organization. So I would say the first step is to identify what's, different between the different pockets. See if there are positive points of influence that you can model. Identify local champions that can evangelize this effort, and get buy-in from the executives and leaders that can actually support you, because you alone on this journey are not going to be successful. You need that support from the leaders that are openly advocating for this culture shift and mindset. And I would start with that and focus on, creating a beacon that can be modeled throughout the organization, and maybe pick one or two groups that you think can create a positive impact, share their experiences, and share the success story, and try to expand from that experience, and maybe you try to copy that for the rest of the divisions in your organization.
Great. Okay, so we have a ton of questions, so I'm going to jump right into the next one. So Bhavani and Mason, what is the impact of the remote workforce on the adoption of Agile? Collaboration is critical to the success of Agile. In this day and time, a lot of team members are in different geographical areas.
I don't actually see that as a challenge, because a lot of organizations today, whether you take, I'll take an example of Lego, or even Spotify, or Netflix, or Amazon for that matter, and they're all very successful with Agile transformations. While I've only, read about the success of these organizations, I've actually been part of, AOL actually, right? And they've had their teams in multiple geographical locations. I remember they had teams in Dry Eye, London. They had teams in Bangalore, India. They have, even nationally, they have teams in different time zones. It's just that you accept that as a culture of your organization, and you empower, the different possible ways you can collaborate with them. There are a lot of tools today, like, HipChat or Skype or, Team from Microsoft for that matter, and, encourage video chatting, and, maybe you can think of how you can combine, that one time that works for everybody for your stand-ups or whatnot. So it's, to me, remote workforce is, is the way of tomorrow. That's how it's, teams are coming together. You just have to think of ways how you get them to work together, and how you empower them with the different tool sets that you have available in the market.
Great, thank you for that. So the next one, Bhavani and Mason, it says, how do you suggest making senior management aware that this is needed? It is, but they don't see it.
So I talked about the cost of delay. There's actually a formula that maybe we can share with you offline to calculate the cost of delay. So a lot of times the senior management and leadership respond to the numbers, right? Because that's what they see, and rightfully so. So identify what's the cost of delay to, not jumping on this and not empowering what they need to do in order for them to empower you in your endeavor to make the transformation, or even, take part in the journey of the transformation. So definitely, we'll send you this, but definitely identify what's the cost of delay so they can understand what the impact is and how that is going to impact in terms of the return on investment, how that is going to impact, within the market space, and how they are lagging behind in the competition. A lot of times, people don't see it, but, it's not as hard to realize what it is when you put that into the equation.
Okay, great. So our next one is, our organization has several business units. However, the IT code uses Agile to release. So we have a component. How do we manage and report this in a hybrid environment?
I want to better understand this question. So when they're saying, however, the IT code uses Agile to release, so I'm assuming that their IT teams or their technical teams are using Agile framework or Agile methodology, but they have a component. How do we manage and report this in a hybrid environment? So when they say hybrid, I'm assuming that they're talking about, a combination of waterfall and Agile. And from my experiences, usually when they say they have hybrid environments, the IT teams kind of or the technical or the dev teams use Agile, whatever framework, from Kanban to release. But then when it comes to the release environment, they have to wait. They, have shelf life for their product. It's just not release on demand. So your question was, how does this work in a hybrid environment? It is hard, right? You kind of lose the integrity of your code at that point. Your code sits somewhere and deteriorates, waiting for that release to happen. And depending on what your release cycle is, if it is not monthly and if it is quarterly, like some of the organizations that I've worked with, then you face problems with integration. So this is what I would call cutting corners, right? And that's where I would recommend that help them see, on the other side of it, that sometimes hybrid cannot work, right? So there's just no silver bullet to that.
Okay, great. So reminder, we have a couple more minutes left, so keep your questions coming if you have them. We still have quite a few to get through. So the next one, and Mason, I think this is for you. This is part of your section.
Yeah.
It says in the opening, it was mentioned that only 16% of organizations are successful. How was success defined in that context?
Great. This information came from Bloomberg, and the way they looked at success was agile or business agility across the enterprise, not just dev teams. And so when you think of 16%, their estimation was 16% of organizations have gotten to a point, that evolutionary point that Bhavani spoke to, where there is just conformity on agility across an enterprise.
Great, thank you for that. Our next question, actually I'm going to paraphrase quite a few of these. So we've had a couple requests. At one point, Mason, you mentioned that you and Bhavani are available if people have questions as they're looking through planning. How can I connect them to you? What's the best way if people have additional questions following the webinar, or as they're going through this mind shift? How can I connect the two of them to you?
Well, that's a great question. In previous times, we've taken a deeper dive on certain questions, and I suggest that you reach out to both of us on our emails, or we can align you with some individual that works with us. But we are definitely open to taking a deeper dive on some of the questions that have come in or thoughts you might have had during the slides themselves. Kelly, if it's not already in the slide deck, we can provide our email addresses right now.
I'll do that as well. So when we send today's recording with some of the follow-up content, I'll make sure that you have email addresses. So if you have questions, they are both great resources. Please feel free to reach out to them directly. As well, you also have my contact information, so please feel free to email me, and I can get that introduction and pass that along to them as well. So we are right at the top of our hour. We have a few questions we haven't got to, so we will get to you directly after this. But I do want to do one last one, and let's see. Another one that came in is, our organization is geographically separated. what's the best way to move from silos in this circumstance?
So when you say the organization is geographically separated, I'm, assuming that you have, within the allocated geography. So let's say that you have, some team within the North America and, some teams in, India. So the first step would be to find cohesiveness and build on the local culture, right? So that would be the first step, to create that semblance within that one allocated geographical area. So once you have created that, then I would, probably say, maybe somehow get these different geographical, teams together. I know it might be expensive, but, it has a lot of values, because a lot of time what happens is, people don't see each other. People don't get to work with each other. And it has, a lot of impacts on the negative side. So that would be one thing that I would suggest. And if you don't think that you can spend that much money, then, at least create time and dedicate time where you are able to connect with your team members on the other side, right? Like, one thing that we did was we actually found a common time that worked for the different teams within the different geographical areas, and we called it tea time. And, just like how you would get up and walk in an office and then have, a conversation around the cooler or in the kitchen or in the break room, we dedicated that time to just, chat and get to know our team members. And one of the other things that we did, I remember when I was at Capital One, was we had this every Friday, right after the Scrum meeting. The team members would have, some kind of trivia that they would ask, and they would, try to understand and get to know their team members better. So that's another way as well.
Great. Thank you both so much. That was a great job. Also, when we sent some follow-up, we've had some additional requests for the cost of delay content. So I'll make sure we make that available to everyone on the call as well. We'll also follow up with any of your additional questions, because I know there's quite a few, and I don't want to keep you past an hour. So thank you, Bhavani. Thank you, Mason, for your time and insight, and for everyone on the call. We will get this content out to you within the next 24 hours, and we hope that this was a beneficial webinar. We hope that you'll join our next one on January 28th, and also that you'll share this internally. If you think this could help benefit your organization, it'll be available on demand. You can forward the link, and we really hope this is helpful. Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.